Keith Carter is my guest, athletics director at Ole Miss, and he has been a fairly busy fellow for the last few weeks. Unprecedented is one of those words that gets thrown around a lot, defined as never done or known before. It's probably an overused word, but in the last few weeks at Ole Miss, it may be the right word to describe what this coaching change over time has looked like at Ole Miss. Keith, I appreciate some of your time. I know a lot of people really anxious to hear from you this morning. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, glad to be here, Richard.
Is unprecedented the right word when you look at a coach choosing to leave a team that is likely a playoff team to go through a very public changeover and then have all of the stuff that goes along with that?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. I don't think we've seen it before, and our team, obviously ranked 6th now, has a chance to just as good a chance as anybody to go win a national championship. And so, for me, it's if the thought is you have to go somewhere else to win a national championship, well, man, in the next 3 or 4 weeks we have a chance to do one right here. So I think unprecedented is a good way to put it. There was a lot of things that happened behind the scenes that were unprecedented as well. But we're focused on Ole Miss now, and obviously, the thing that really was the frustrating part to me more than anything was the fact that the focus was taken off of these players and off of our student athletes, and we have some of the best stories in college football this year right on our team. Obviously, 11-1, and man, it's just awesome now to put the focus back on the guys and focus on this playoff run.
That's a similar message to what Chancellor Gwen Boyce gave last week, was a focus on the team and the assistant coaches that had worked so hard to kind of keep the team focused and together. We may jump around a little bit. There's a lot of ground to cover. Last night, the college football playoff rankings came out, the penultimate rankings. The final ones will come out on Sunday. There are a lot of people that say the next to last set of rankings are the most important because you don't see a ton of movement after championship weekend. What was your level of deep breath, exhale, maybe legitimately smile for the first time in a couple of weeks when you saw Ole Miss pop up at number 6 last night?
Well, it was fantastic. And again, so much credit to our guys, to the players first and foremost, and then obviously Pete and the staff. But yeah, it was awesome. We were doing a ton of work behind the scenes, working with committee members, just making sure that they had all the information on who was going to coach our team, who was going to be, in the building, preparing our team, those type of things. Obviously, the league office, knew that information. They were helping as well. And so we felt pretty good about the feedback we were getting, that we were not going to necessarily be penalized for Coach Kiffin leaving, as long as we had, a great plan in place. And obviously the team's still there, all intact. And couldn't be more excited about Coach Golding and him leading the way. So, I know some of our fans and people were a little anxious out there yesterday, as were we. But we knew we were talking to the right people, and we were getting the feedback that we thought was good.
There was some criticism, and maybe less criticism and more frustration among Ole Miss fans about feeling like they didn't know anything between Sunday, when you announced that Pete Golding was going to be the next head coach, and an expected press conference today that has since been canceled because Pete announced last night he wanted to focus on recruiting and also getting ready for the playoff, and said he would talk Sunday after the final rankings came out. What was your media strategy? What was your information strategy? Did you need, 48 hours or so to try and put things together behind the scenes? And tell us a little bit more about how you were able to lean on the committee or have people advocate for you.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, sometimes there's there's things that have to be done kind of behind the curtain that, unfortunately we just can't put out there, and we can't give an update every hour, at the top of the hour and those type of things. And so we were working, mainly on solidifying our staff, and who was going to be here to coach the team and those type of things. We feel like we had a good plan, but at the end of the day, we're working with, a couple of coaches, at least one coach that, had got on a plane to Baton Rouge. And so we're working on getting him back, which we announced yesterday with Coach Weiss. And so, I understand when there's a void of information, it gets filled with all kinds of things and rumors and angst and all of that. But we were working slow and steady behind the scenes, and that's where you just have to ask your fan base and your donors just to trust the process and know that we're going to get the information out when we can, and I think we have a pretty good track record of getting things right. And so, I feel like yesterday afternoon when we were able to make that announcement that this is our staff, our goal was obviously to get that out before the rankings, last night, even though we were doing the work behind the scenes with phone calls and those type of things. But, hopefully yesterday was a big day for us. Obviously, we got that out. You get the ranking you want. You introduce Coach Golding at the basketball game, and, everybody loves that. We bring the team out. We have a couple of winners, down in Jackson last night at the Connerly Trophy with Trinidad and Patrick Kudas. So I think yesterday was a pretty strong media day for us. But at the same time, we do apologize sometimes, when you can't get anything, out exactly at the timing, that people might want it.
There have been a couple of things that people looked very, very closely at. First, the statement that the university put out, I guess it was Thursday or Friday, a week ago, where you said there was an expected announcement coming following the Saturday following the Mississippi State game, which happened on Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. And people felt like that kind of painted you and Lane Kiffin also into a corner. And then because people were expecting an announcement of some sort on that Saturday, you had national media that followed Ole Miss from Starkville to Oxford that were camped out across from the chancellor's house, that were trying to keep up with every move that was happening. Marty Smith was embedded in Oxford for didn't sleep for 36 hours. What can you tell us about that Saturday and the long meeting that you had with Lane Kiffin, with the chancellor there, and when you made the decision ultimately that Pete Golding was going to be the next head coach?
Yeah, and again, the unprecedented part kind of comes back into this too. And, obviously, the week of the Egg Bowl, Coach Kiffin is our coach. He's Ole Miss's coach at that time. And we had talked and said, we have to have an answer on the Saturday after the Egg Bowl. And I think, that decision, in hindsight was a good one. We played great, played really well in the game. And that was the thing. I was at practice every day that week leading up to the Egg Bowl. We had people in the building. The assistant coaches did a fantastic job. And again, most importantly, our players really locked in. And I give them a ton of credit for that last 4 or 5 weeks of the season and how they locked in and won the games. And, didn't turn this into 2022 when we, the distractions really cost us a really strong finish. So give the players a lot of credit. But that Saturday, we get back and, I'm up at the office pretty much all day. And ultimately the meeting doesn't happen until around 6 p.m. And, I'm informed officially that Coach is going to LSU. And, Pete Golding was a guy that was always in the mix with us. He's a guy that has been here for 3 years. He's got a great track record, coaching obviously at Alabama and winning national championships. And, Pete's a guy in that building that everybody respects. And not just the defense, the offensive guys, the offensive staff, they loved him. And so he was a guy that has always been, on our radar as it could be the guy. And so we called Pete in and said, hey, we want you to be not only our guy in the short term, to help us solidify this, but also we think you're the guy that can keep Ole Miss football, at a super high level and even maybe take it to the next level. So, but yeah, again, you talk about the void of information. I know Saturday was one of those days. And, for me, it was a long day. We ended up staying in the office here at about 3 a.m. that night and trying to get some things done. But, it was one of those deals, as soon as Coach Kiffin told us that he was moving on, we had a great plan in place. And, I feel like it was implemented well on Sunday, and Pete's just done a fantastic job really in the last, 3 days of bringing that building together and putting the staff back together. And obviously the players are super fired up.
When was Lane Kiffin told that he would not coach Ole Miss in the playoff? Because he very publicly has said over and over that is something that he wanted to do and didn't seem to be able to understand why that wasn't going to work.
Yeah, there's been a lot of things he said publicly that I'm not sure are totally accurate. I think that both Coach and his representation knew, several weeks ago that the coaching in the playoffs was not going to be an option if he was not the Ole Miss head coach. And, I think
finding out at 8:30 on Sunday morning for the very first time that he would not be coaching the playoff is not accurate?
No, that's not accurate. That's not accurate. The only thing that was a little bit of a wrinkle in it, Richard, was the fact that if Auburn had beaten Alabama, we were going to play in the SEC championship. That threw a little wrinkle in it. Not to say he would have coached in that game, but with the shorter time period, that was maybe the only little nuance to it. But absolutely, it was very clear that coaching in the postseason was not going to be an option for Coach Kiffin a few weeks ago.
This is Mornings with Richard Cross, presented by Community Bank, rooted in our community, communitybank.net. A little truth versus fiction. A statement that Lane Kiffin's vehicle was run off the road by Ole Miss fans on the way to the airport. Can you shed any light on that?
No, but I did see where Sean Tyndall shed some light on it yesterday. That's about all I know. I don't know about that. I mean, I saw the interview, obviously, but I have a feeling that goes along with some other things that have been said, here in the last 72 hours from Coach.
Lane Kiffin said players begged for him to stay and coach into the playoff. We have seen quotes or I guess posts on X from some players that said that is simply not accurate. You did have a meeting with the Leadership Council, a group of football players that kind of represent the rest of the team on Sunday morning. Can you tell us about that meeting with them and what the players' reaction was and this idea that they were begging for Lane Kiffin to stay?
Well, I don't want to, breach some of the confidentiality of those guys. I mean, I know, man, first of all, let me just say the leadership group of our football team is an amazing group of young men. They were fantastic and have been. I know most of those guys, and to spend some time with them on Sunday morning was great. I'll let them kind of tweet out what they want to tweet out and give information that they want to give. But I don't think the way he portrayed that meeting was accurate. There was a lot of pushback to him leaving. And, it was really one of those things where, these guys knew they needed coaches to coach the game, Richard, and it was sounding like he was going to take, all the offensive staff with him if they didn't, he didn't coach in the game. And so there was a lot of discussion around that, but I think begging for him to stay is certainly an overstatement. I think that, our players are starting to show, maybe what really happened in that meeting.
How did the Charlie Weiss Jr. situation play out? He did get on that plane and go to Baton Rouge, but you mentioned a few minutes ago the announcement came out yesterday that he was returning, would be the primary play caller for the playoffs. It feels like maybe there's a little bit of ambiguity about his future beyond the playoffs. What can you tell us about that?
Well, first, let me say this. Charlie Weiss is a really, really good person, and Charlie is a really, really good offensive play caller. And so we had been talking to Charlie about, coming back and calling the plays. Charlie was committed to that from the very first moment. And, honestly, I think Charlie was put in a little bit of a tough spot with some of the way, he was asked to go to Baton Rouge and those type of things. But man, I could not be more fired up about having Charlie Weiss back here. We were in constant communication, not only with Charlie, but with his representation. He was telling us from the very get-go that he was going to come back and call the plays, and he was not going to leave this team, on this playoff run. So, all of our fans and all of our donors, they can be very assured that, Charlie Weiss is going to come back and do the very best job he can to help us, go down this stretch and win a national championship. So a lot of credit to him for the way he's doing this. And, man, I can't wait to get him back here. And the guys feel the same way. Trinidad and Kiwan, all the guys, they're really, really excited to get Charlie back.
Today's National Signing Day, there's a lot of recruiting that is going on. Is there a scenario where Charlie Weiss could be recruited to stay at Ole Miss beyond just whatever this playoff run turns out to be?
We're not focused on that right now, Richard. We're focused on, like I said, getting this staff back together, getting the team solidified, making sure they know what they're dealing with here over the next, 18 days until we play, our first ever college football playoff game. Those are conversations we can have, down the road. But again, I think what's so great about Pete Golding, the very first thing he did is he said, hey, we've got to start thinking about these players. We've got to start thinking about these guys and putting the focus back on these guys and making sure they have clarity on who's going to be coaching them down this stretch and making sure that we do everything we possibly can to give our best effort to give these guys the best chance to win.
Things moved quickly on Sunday morning, and I don't just mean at Ole Miss. You weren't operating in a bubble. There were a lot of things that were happening within the SEC footprint and nationally in terms of jobs that were being filled, jobs that have been open. How much did Pete Golding sell you on being the head coach beyond just, hey, this is a guy that makes sense because players like him and he's done a good job and he's got a good background?
Well, Pete and I had several conversations, obviously, and obviously been around Pete. Know Pete, he's been here for 3 years. Pete had a great plan, and I think we're actually seeing that plan implemented now. More in a temporary form, obviously putting the staff together for this run. But man, his plan for Ole Miss, his plan for the future, it's phenomenal. And we did cancel the press conference today at Pete's request. And it's all about the fact that, hey, we're not starting something new today. We don't run out there and put a suit on and kiss babies and start something today. We're going to finish something. And I think that was Pete's main thing, is time to put the back on the players. We got recruiting today. We're jumping on game planning right after that. And so I'm super excited about not only the short term and what Pete brings to the table, but man, I think we're looking for a very solidified and just a great run for Ole Miss football that's coming in the future.
There was a lot of thought that you would name an interim head coach to get through the playoff or to kind of get through the immediate window and then would figure out the permanent situation. Was that on the table? And if it was, when did you switch from the idea of interim to permanent with Pete Golding?
Yeah, Richard, in any situation, you kind of assess and you look at all possibilities and all options. And certainly that was an option to name an interim. But, the more myself and the chancellor thought about it, why do that when we have the guy who we know is the guy right in front of us. And so, we decided to go ahead and make the move, make Pete the permanent coach. And, again, I think that helps us today with signing day to know, hey, this is going to be the guy. But more importantly, I think it just helps us for the future. It's a guy that knows Ole Miss, has worked to get himself back here. His family loves it here. He wants to be here. He wants to grow this place. And I think it's something that, is very refreshing. And, man, he jumped right in and said, hey, I'm ready to take this on short term and long term. And again, I couldn't be more excited. The chancellor couldn't be more excited.
I want to ask you a question about Glenn Boyce. Since he has been chancellor at Ole Miss, he has operated for the most part pretty quietly, almost in the shadows. And sometimes people see that, and if they don't see somebody out very publicly a lot all the time, they almost say that's a sign of weakness. With the conversation that we had last week, it did not feel like there was a lot of weakness in terms of Glenn Boyce. What role did he play? Obviously, he was involved in the Friday meeting a week and a half ago, and then was very involved again on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've ever associated the word weak with Glenn Boyce. That would probably be the farthest word, from him. He's an awesome leader. Obviously we worked together for 6 years. I couldn't ask for a better boss and partner to work with through this. He's just been great. He's been a steady hand. He's got a lot of experience, not only in academia, but in sports and athletics. Obviously he was a huge part of conversations throughout this whole thing. And when Lane and I met on Saturday night, Glenn was actually not at that meeting on Saturday night. But when we got back together on Sunday morning, he was obviously a huge part of where we went and the decisions that we made. But don't take the fact that maybe you don't see him on Twitter or you don't see him out in front a lot. He is an incredible leader. Our university is very fortunate to have him. And I think about it every day that, man, what would this job that I do be like if he was not the guy? Because he's just a great person to work with.
Couple of minutes left. I want to try and squeeze in 2 or 3 things that are practical. And as Ole Miss fans, attention is shifting from coaching search, who's next, to playoff. What is the ticket process for the college football playoff game that will happen in Oxford on either the 19th or the 20th of December?
So I believe those will go on sale Sunday after the final announcement. All of our current season ticket holders will have first right of refusal to get their tickets. We're going to sell 13,000 student tickets that will be first come, first serve. So not just the ones that got season tickets this year. It will be first come, first serve. So that'll allow everybody to be in the mix for that. But yeah, I think we have to give 3,500 to the visiting team. So, we're expecting obviously a huge crowd. Oxford's going to be electric. And, that's the other part. Just really happy that the committee did this the right way and did what we deserve for the city of Oxford, and what it means for this great city that we live in.
And then last thing for you, campus closes during Christmas break. Is there any scenario where student housing will be available to students during that time to be able to come back and have somewhere to stay?
Back to Chancellor Boyce, absolutely. Campus will be running full steam ahead. Dorms are open, housing's open. We'll be ready to roll.
Outstanding. Keith Carter, thanks so much for your time this morning. I know it's been a tough few weeks for you. Maybe you can find time to get in the deer stand soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Richard. Good to catch up.
You as well. Keith Carter, Athletics Director at Ole Miss. What a few weeks it has been. We're back with you right after this. Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk, Mississippi.